Present arms.
Stating the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order arms. Left pace. Forward march.
I'm Jennifer Mildred. I'm an assistant attorney with the Consumer Protection Section in the Attorney General's Office. I also have the honor and the pleasure of being a part of the Veterans Unit in our office. The Veterans Unit Patriot Program were created within our office because Attorney General DeWine recognized that service members, veterans, and their families sometimes face unique challenges. He wanted to create a way for our office to give back just a little bit of what our service members have given to us. So our unit has done various things, such as create a website that has a wealth of information and resources for veterans and service members. We also focus on areas of concern for which our office can be assistance, and those matters can be fast-tracked to the appropriate individuals. You can stop by the registration table and pick up one of our program cards for more information. Also, this event today is supported and funded in part by the Bobby Thompson funds. These funds were designated for use by veterans organizations. This event is also co-sponsored by the Buckeye State Council of the Vietnam Veterans of America. We would like to say thank you to them for co-hosting with us. We could not have done this without them. You'll hear from Cliff Riley, the president, in a couple of minutes, but first I'd like to present Mr. Riley and Mr. Don Jones, the administrator of the Buckeye State Council, with this proclamation from the Attorney General in gratitude for their service and participation. I also want to thank a few people from our office that really helped us in preparing this event. Jonathan Fulkerson, who's Chief Legal Counsel, Tammy Puff, who is the Regional Director for North Central Ohio, Melissa Wright, who's the Assistant Section Chief in Consumer Protection, Amber Amar, who is the Public Affairs Assistant, and Casey Hamilton, who's out at the registration table. She is a paralegal in Health and Human Services. Without them, we could not have made this happen today. Thank you all for being here. I know many of you came from far away. Thank you to our speakers. We look forward to hearing from you. So now I have the pleasure of introducing a woman that really actually needs no introduction. She approached us with the idea of this CLE geared toward assistance of veterans and has been a great help in helping us plan and prepare this event. Evelyn Lundberg Stratton retired from the Supreme Court of Ohio early to pursue criminal justice reforms with an emphasis on veterans who become involved in the justice system. She established the Veterans in the Courts Initiative in 2009. For over 20 years, she has led reform efforts affecting those in the revolving door of criminal justice and mental illness, helping to lead the movement on mental health courts. She also assisted the Department of Veterans Administration in establishing veteran treatment courts. She served on the VA committee that launched the Veterans Justice Outreach Program. She founded Operation Legal Help Ohio. She co-founded Resurrecting Lives. She co-chairs the Ohio Attorney General's Task Force on Mental Illness and Criminal Justice, with a subcommittee on Veterans Courts and Military Affairs. She teaches and speaks nationally on veterans and criminal justice reform issues, and she currently practices appellate law at Vorey, Sater, Seymour, and Peace. She also consults on criminal justice and mental health reform issues through Stratton Consulting. Without further ado, Justice Stratton.
I want to also thank Jennifer. She really was a mover and shaker in getting this going. I can't tell you how many emails we exchanged and how many times we talked in trying to put this all together. So I'm enormously grateful for all of her assistance and help in getting us started on this. And I also want to thank Pete and Donna. Pete is the editor. So I'll just jump to that right away. There is something circulating. It looks like this, and I'll give it to you as well. He puts out a newsletter. He gives me the credit for it, but surely he does all the work on it. We started with 5 pages about four some years ago of interest. We have PTSD, we have TBI, we have veterans courts, we have grants, we have seminars. we have to fight now to keep it down to 30 pages. There is so much happening out there, so much information. It comes out every week, so if you're interested, you can just stick your card up and he'll add you to the mailing list, or you can put your name and address down. And so I'll circulate this after my speech. There's one already going around. So you can look at it and see if it's something useful for your practice or your area of interest, and if you are, sign up. I have a long family history in the military. My 5 uncles were in World War II. My father was in World War II, a bomb demolition expert in the Army. I lost my grandfather in the Merchant Marines during World War II. My 2 brothers were in the Vietnam theater. One was on the Midway and one was in Thailand, because I grew up in Thailand as a missionary kid, and he spoke fluent Thai, and so they dropped him behind the Laotian lines where they swear we had no military to try to look for missing in action, and he had lots of experiences there. And I have a nephew now currently in the Air Force. And so beyond that, when I grew up as a missionary kid, the only Americans I knew were other missionaries and GIs, because we lived near military bases and went to boarding school in South Vietnam, which was in the full throes of the Vietnam War, and the school had to evacuate. And so I have all this exposure to the military in a very, very different and unique way than most people do. I can remember as a child, the only real contact we had in learning about America was we got the Newsweek and the Time magazines. They came by boat mail, so they were like a month old by the time they got there. But we used to be so angry because the military would be so castigated in those news articles, and they were always talking about the bad things we were doing in South Vietnam, and we knew how terrible the Viet Cong were, and that never was reported. So I can remember as a child being so angry at our media and so supportive of our military and the wonderful things they were doing because we saw it firsthand. So when I came back to America to go to college and became a judge, I had no exposure to mental health issues in Thailand, never saw a judge, never saw a lawyer. So another long story how I ended up in the law. But when I became a judge, I saw it front and center. It was amazing how many people were in my court with mental health issues, and that's kind of what launched me on my efforts to start mental health courts and other things. And I was in DC one day giving a speech on mental health, sat next to a gentleman from the VA. He said, "We're going to start veterans courts." And I said, "Well, what's that?" Because I knew there was a Veterans Appeals Benefit Court. And when he described it, I said, "Well, that's pretty much a mental health court or a drug court with a vet in it." I said, "But it's really hard to get a new movement going on a specialty docket. I've been doing it for years. Why don't you join our movement?" So they invited some of us who had done mental health courts to a conference in DC that they invited a whole bunch of VA folks and the brass and everybody to, and then as an outgrowth of that, I was asked to be on a committee in which we established what we call Veterans Justice Outreach Specialists. And you're going to hear from one this afternoon. I want to know how many in the audience know what a VJO is. Okay, I hope you all know what a VJO is when you leave here, because they are one of the most valuable assets the VA has produced in this field. What happens in incarceration, the VA had a very good program of having assigned staff go into the prisons, find defendants, hook them up with services before they came out. But nothing dealt with veterans coming into the system. So we established the VJO, and when we met with the team in Washington, we said, please do not just limit this to veterans courts, because some places will never have them. Some places will take forever to start them. Some people don't believe in a specialized docket. But every veteran deserves to have access to a VJO. And so that's what they did. They have 154 hospitals in the country, so they set up 154 VJOs. We're now doubled. We doubled very quickly. Ohio has 5 hospitals, so we have 10, I think maybe half an extra in Cleveland. And what the VJO is like a super probation officer. You have someone enter the criminal justice system, you call your VJO that covers your county, and your VJO can determine what services they're entitled to. They can get a physical exam. What defendant you have gets a physical exam when they go into the court system? They can hook them up with homelessness services. They can hook them up with jobs. We have a federally funded job training program just aimed for vets with special needs called Jobs for Vets. There's 72 employees across the state, mostly in Job and Family Services headquarters, just for vets. And what astounded me is how little everybody in Ohio knew what else was out there. So part of my challenge has been just trying to connect dots and get people aware. But the VJO knows all those resources. It can be really helpful. So if you've got a defendant that is homeless, the Obama administration goal is to end homelessness with vets. And so you can contact the homeless coordinator and help your vet get a home. If you need employment, because that'll increase your chances in probation, there's the jobs for vets. If you need transportation services, you need ways to go back and forth to treatment, you need immediate cash assistance because you're going to lose your home, you can contact the Veteran Service Commissions. Every single county has a Veteran Service Commission. They get 0.5% of your property tax to service veterans, so they have a budget. Not all of them use all that budget. In fact, they only use about 60% of what the taxes collect, and yet those funds are available that you can reach out to. And then if you have civil needs resulting from the defendants that you're representing, you have a foreclosure, you have a car repossessed, you're going to lose your house and get evicted, we then established Operation Legal Help Ohio, which there's a brochure scattered around and there's a bunch out front. This is a nonprofit that I helped start, and it has 350 lawyers now signed up to offer free services to low-income veterans and military. And so you can pick one of these and keep these in your office, and if you have civil needs, you call this number and you can get civil assistance on the issues. Or if you have a vet that doesn't have criminal justice needs but has civil needs. And there's a pile of them out back. Take as many as you want until they're gone, because we're going into a new printing courtesy of the Department of Veteran Services. But we have 350 attorneys throughout the state of Ohio, and we've now started a low bono referral service. We call it low bono. It's for those who are over the 200% of poverty, over the income qualification for free services, and we will refer them to a law firm that will agree to do it for a third of their normal fee. So there's just so many of these resources out there. We have veterans courts, 17 veterans courts in Ohio now. But every judge is able to practice the principles of a veteran court, because every judge can call the VJO. You can call the VJO. Every judge can access those services. And every time you put a veteran defendant on federal resources, you free up those resources for your local people. The Attorney General's office has funded a peer mentor training program that's an online resource. We're very close to launching it. It will give training for peer mentors for veterans courts, forms, requirements, guidelines, and things like that. And then a group of us in this room got together and we worked very hard on a statute to require every judge to look at veterans' background and mitigation. There was a very prominent Supreme Court case that came out that said that you had to look at a veteran's military background. It was a death penalty case. It was Korean War, a very ancient war, Korean War. The defense attorney had not brought in any evidence of all the trauma he suffered in the Korean War. The Supreme Court reversed it for ineffective assistance of counsel. The federal guidelines used to say you don't look at military background. As a result of that case, they changed the federal guidelines to say you do. And we were able to follow suit. Senator Schiavone out of Youngstown spearheaded the effort, and now every misdemeanor and every felony case, the judge, one of the factors in mitigation they have to look at is their military background. We give them discretion. We judges like our discretion. We don't tell them what to do with it. But what we were hearing is from judges, well, I don't have to look at that. I don't have to pay attention to that. Well, now they do. We have to be careful because sometimes judges and juries tend to use those mitigating factors really almost as aggravating factors. And so we have to be very careful. And so some of the help you'll get in the process today is how to do that. Department of Veteran Services is a wonderful, wonderful resource. Lots of information on it. I encourage you to get on that website and take advantage of it. So those are just some of the many things. I could give you a much longer speech, but we're not here to hear me today. We're here to hear some other very, very wonderful speakers. But there's just a lot happening. There's a lot available for veterans, a lot of resources. You just have to know to start looking and to start finding them. And part of my mission is to just try to connect those dots and get that word out as much as I can. So before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to introduce Cliff Riley. And Cliff, we've met recently. We're working on some legislation in Congress to try to provide online training for all non-VA medical personnel, physicians on down, on post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and other military issues or other injuries that occur in a war that are specific to veterans and their families. And so the veterans, Vietnam veterans are really behind this and really helpful. And they have been partners from, I think, the very first day I started working on this project. I've partnered with the veterans groups and with Tom Burke particularly. And so, Cliff, we're really grateful that you can come as president and say a few words to our group before we introduce our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you, Justice Stratton. By the way, Justice Stratton was the recipient of one of our major awards for everything that she's been doing for our veterans. Thanks, everyone, for being here and your interest in veterans. We've reviewed the curriculum for today, and we've read the bio of everybody that's going to be on the panel, and it's going to be a fantastic day. It really is. And Dr. Platoni, where were you when I needed you 50 years ago? Okay. And you'll find out why in a minute, Larry. But why is the Vietnam Veterans of America part of this? And it's because we were one of the forerunners in the Veterans Court up in New York and Buffalo. We were involved with that and starting that up. And so in Ohio, we've been involved a lot. We are the only major veterans organization in Ohio that has veteran chapters in incarcerated prisons. And we have 6 of them, and some of them are remarkable of what they do. And we had a board of directors meeting in Grafton, and they have a large veteran group there, and they have a catering service? Yeah, they have a catering service up there. They cater some of the big programs, and when people come in, and to go up there to watch it's just remarkable. I want to say this real quick, is that a lot of people like to call those that serve in the military and those veterans heroes. Veterans, we don't call ourselves heroes, but we are special. And I'm going to tell you why we're special. And I know a lot of people on the panel, a few of those are veterans and with quite distinguished careers. And they'll remember some of this, and some of you out there with veterans will know what I'm telling you. Anyone that signs up to go in the military services, of course, they affirm the oath that I will defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, domestic and foreign, blah, 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 blah. But there's something else that veterans do. They have to live by a code. And a lot of you never heard this before, but we, all of us, those that went before us, those that are in now, and those that will come after us, you have to live by the code. It's the code of conduct. Number 1 says, I'm an American fighting in the service of my country to defend our way of life, and I am prepared to die for that. Now, I've made it pretty much in my life to study and read code of ethics, code of conducts from everywhere across the country, whether it would be from the president on down to the U.S. House and Senate, Ohio House and Senate, governors, mayors, township trustees. The veteran, the GI, is the only one that says in the code of conduct, I'm prepared to die for you. We're the only one, and that makes us special. And that's why you're here today, hopefully. And if it wasn't for the programs that are out there today, I would be living under a bridge. I have a hell of a testimony to tell you, but we don't have time to do that. So I want to welcome everyone here. I want to thank you, and so we'll turn this over to you.